We are joined by the wonderful Joe McNally and the equally wonderful Seth Miranda here in London at Grays of Westminster. Thank you very much, chaps, for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the invitation.
We are going to be doing a little bit of a camera chatty chat, I think. Talk about what you're here for and also what you're up to over the next few months, next year, etc. How are you both doing?
Hey, in London, so I'm doing well. One of my favorite places to be.
Excellent.
We're both on a lot of caffeine.
Yeah. How's the jet lag going?
Yeah, I lost an entire day, so but it's worth it for Joe and coming in. First of all, this place is amazing. This is my first time stepping in here after hearing about it for so long, especially from this guy. It's incredible here. So if you are coming to London and you are a photo nerd, you have to stop through here because it's a museum. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable.
It is.
Yeah, it's a repository of Nikon history. And also, too, it's not just history. It's, Z9, all the modern stuff is here, but also you can reflect on the legacy of a very powerful image-making company.
But also just the Grays, he was just sharing stories like crazy. Like they just passed through, like all these amazing people stopped through, all these people that bought stuff from here. And it's like the legacy is built in these walls. You can kind of feel it, especially if you hear the stories.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, we got to put him on the YouTube thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Put him on the YouTube thing. We're going to have to start a series.
To start to make our little videos with Gray in them.
Joe, our kids started a YouTube channel. Did you see this? Have you seen anything that they're putting out?
That's the thing. Gray always talks about the importance of oral history. You guys should get him on camera, get him recording all these thoughts, all these reverberations throughout his history.
100%. We've done a few special sort of, not Christmas specials, but we've done a few specials
That's
with him,
true.
and we definitely want to make it into a series. I think 2024 is going to be the year of Grey stories.
More Gray for sure.
100%.
Just bug his office. Just bug it, record it, throw it out there.
There you go. Subversive New York meets classy London. Yeah, put him on camera, record him. Bug his office. You know what I'm saying?
It's mafia meets gangster.
That's what it is.
I know some KGB people, so it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
So you're in town for what exactly?
Well, Nikon UK has a school. They periodically, not periodically, quite often they're doing workshops. And they decided to take a walk on the wild side and invite both of us to teach lighting.
No, Joe called me at 3 a.m, said, pack your bags, got to go to London now. And now I know I'm here and we're going to go teach a workshop. But
no advance notice whatsoever.
It was pretty smash and grabby. It was like, let's go pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. What's happening in this industry, and this may be an open door to the technology, the tech is coming so fast. Like Seth gets cameras kind of, thrown at him, technology, et cetera. He's got to decipher it all. I stand in awe of this guy and how much he knows. So Nikon is in the same boat. They've got not a huge staff. And they've got tons of things coming their way, new announcements, this and that. So yeah, we basically threw this up online a couple months ago and said, hey, let's try it.
That's nice. And we always love to have you here. You come in almost every year teaching a workshop. And obviously, this is a new format.
How do you like being described as a new format?
I just love how people still can't figure out how to describe me. Like every time someone like, it's like, I shoot weird stuff. I have a weird style. But I think what's really different about this workshop is we're really approaching from a lighting standpoint, even though it's a Nikon workshop. And it's a portrait masterclass, right? So we're going beyond just the gear and we're going into the actual image making here.
Exactly. And let's also, while we're at it, give a big shout out to ProPhoto, who is supporting the workshop, supplying us with lighting gear. And there's just no question about it. ProPhoto is the Rolls Royce of lighting in this industry. It absolutely is. Nothing else, in my experience, even comes close.
And I appreciate not having to blow a disc out of my back, lugging gear across the ocean. So ProPhoto will be there and give us everything we need. But yeah, it's going to be a really cool workshop from the venue, the talent, the support from the brands, and this what's in here is what's really gonna set it off, I think.
Yeah, I almost wish that we could also do an interview with you after the workshop so you can tell us how it went.
Like our shirts are half off. Like, listen, man, we went in there the fourth quarter.
Settle some of his hair, like everything.
You burned your eyebrows off somehow.
It's just there's always some form of hopefully instructive mayhem at a workshop, and that indicates really good energy because people are alive and excited and passionate about and they're on your case. They're there for 2 days. I always regard a workshop as a gift to me from someone who's attending, because the most valuable thing you can give anybody in your life is your time. And so these folks are dropping out of their lives for a couple days. They spent money, and so it's up to us to deliver on that promise.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to swing back to, so we were talking about lighting.
Yeah, what do you think about our lighting here?
I had to clean up your game, Con. I mean, I had to clean up your game.
Personally, I would have lined this entire thing with silver. Little fill. You know?
You would go specular?
I know. I
You
look
would
like
go
a panda, but never mind.
How many flash guns would you use to leave this space?
Oh, Lord.
Speed lights?
Yes.
Speed lights. I would not. There's a special place in hell for people who have polished wood. Do you know how hard this is to light? Well, you guys obviously do, because you're lighting this right now. You know, I mean, I love the store. This would be a nightmare to light.
Yes. So this is why we moved the live streams from down here to upstairs, because every single week trying to set up the lighting down here, also closing off the secondhand department for an hour and a half each Friday, and then add to it the Nikon report, it just got a little bit insane. So at least upstairs we've got those nice high ceilings. We can kind of.
But you have us in the basement because Seth is here? Is that what you're trying to say?
I feel at home. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just wants to make us feel comfortable.
Well, the only thing that's missing is the background audio of like dripping pipes.
That's right. Missing.
It's trains. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry.
Don't worry, I'll edit in the post.
So that it still sounds like you're at home.
But what is the most amount of flash guns have you ever used on the set for one shot?
Let me guess. It was either the D850 street shot or that one where you lit the entire plane.
Yeah, the plane, that was a long time ago, and that was an absolutely foolish thing to have done. But yeah, I used about, I don't know, 40 or so. But the only serious shot, I can say, very serious shot I did with a lot of flash guns, we called it Street Scene. And Nikon said, look, we want you to use as many of the new radio flash, the SB800, and so I said, all right, I'm game, I mean, I'm a freelance photographer. It was a job. I'm like, I'm going to say yes. So we used 32 on that. And genius here, of course, I didn't do my research. I thought, well, it's a radio, I can use as many as I like, Turns out, no, the radio bandwidth limits you to 16, a max of 16. So then I had to figure out on location on that day how I could get one of the 16 radio-driven flashes to also then trigger all the other flashes on what we used to call SU4 mode, where they were optical triggers.
Yeah.
So that was, just, a mix of being experienced at the camera, able to pull it off, but just mix in a healthy dose of stupidity.
But you're Joe McNally. You shoot like that every day. Don't you just like take a truckload of speed lights, you put them out, like that's it? That's how we go? You're Joe McNally.
I think that has become people's vision of what you do, even though that's actually not how you shoot now. But somehow you've managed to make this kind of brand for yourself as, I shoot with a lot of speed lights. What are you going to do about it?
Well, the thing is, speed lights have been de-emphasized, over the course of time. And the weird thing is about 6 or 7 years ago, I've been represented by the Monroe Gallery, very prestigious gallery in Santa Fe. And I've been with them for about 20 years. And they did a retrospective, one-man show. First time I was so honored. And I stood in that room, and there were about 50 of theoretically my best photographs up on the walls. 40 of them were available light.
Wow. Interesting.
So, the path of photography is not a straight line.
Never.
Never, ever will be that.
But speed lights is how I met you.
That's true. Very fateful.
How did you meet? Yeah.
So a million years ago, in my early days of my career, I shot BMX and skateboarding on the street. So I was shooting secondhand speed lights all over the street, mainly at night, using slide film and running from cops, people stealing my strobes, leaving them all over the place. And I was just trying to figure it out. I didn't have a light meter, nothing. So I just kept on like figuring it out more and more and more. And then I found this Hot Shoe Diaries book, and I was like, this is everything I'm doing. No one's talking about this stuff. And my entire side, all our street rats were using speed lights. We couldn't afford at the time Quantums. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
So we couldn't do it, right? So we were using Vivitar this and whatever brand that we found at garage sales. So I'm reading this guy's book, and it's slowly like cleaning up the excess that I wasn't getting to and sped up my process. And I was like, I'm gonna check out this guy's next thing. And then I was finding articles, found videos, and I'm like, oh, this guy's all right. And then Adorama, the connection over there. And then one day I go into Adorama and I'm talking to his wife and I don't know it. And she was running the pro department. She made sure no matter what happened, I could always leave there shooting. If I had a problem, there was some way she could fix it. So I get back out there and get a job going because I was hustling check to check. And this one time I wrecked the camera. I got hit and I couldn't figure out why everything was so blurry. I never really heard of a lens getting knocked out of calibration before.
Yeah.
So she's like, talk to my husband. He'll know what the problem is. And I'm like, talk to your husband, this random guy. Who am I going to talk to, you know? And then there was a demo happening there with Joe McNally. This was before the event space. I mean, they just threw chairs in the middle of a room next to a wall of TVs that were for sale. And he was just trying to make things happen. I walk in there and Annie's like, oh, I'm so glad to get to meet him finally. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, the inscription on his book that says, Annie, the only light I'll ever need. You're that Annie. And so I went up to him and I told him everything about it. And he invited me on his sets. He asked me to assist a couple times. We did the big workshop in the Tribeca. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
That giant one?
Yeah.
And I think that's when we started working more and more. And I was like, I just don't want to embarrass myself in front of Joe McNally. And I think Dan Norton vouched for me a little bit.
Well, you know, the thing I appreciate about Seth and Daniel, you know, is that they're younger photographers, but they come from a place like he just mentioned, slide film, you know, so there's underpinnings there. There's legacy. There's, you know, respect for kind of where we came from, you know, and it's not just like, hey, I bought this fancy camera. I put it on program and now I'm an excellent photographer. You know, I mean, you know, there's that old story about, you know, the guy who goes into the music shop and buys a violin. What is he after that? Well, he's a guy who bought a violin. Right. You know, somebody goes into a camera store, buys a camera. What are they now? A photographer. You know, so the gap between fantasy and reality is can be very wide in our industry. You know, there is training, there is instinct, there's pictorial judgment, there's you know, picture taste.
There's chops.
You know, chops is basically a one-word way of saying that.
What's chops?
It's like you're building up a skill set based on experience and like just being able to get through situations. So I pride myself on not just being a New Yorker, but I was raised by guys in studios that no one will ever know, who let me on their sets. And I killed myself till the week was over and they sat you down and explained something. Right. Or you noticed the little things. And if you were smart enough to pick up what the little nuances were, you got better. But I saw a lot of assistants that didn't know what they were looking at, couldn't read the language. And I kept on just finding guys I really liked their work and just wrote them emails, tried to catch them in the meetup spots at New York, where a lot of photographers just end up at the end of the day. In Union Square back in the early 2000s, every photographer that shot for skateboard or BMX magazines met up there and we traded DV tapes and prints. And we were just like trying to figure out where the spots were, where to go. There was no internet, there was internet, but there was no social media. So that's how we connected. But I was chasing after these guys that were doing commercial work that I was just like astonished that was in camera and just working hard enough to work under them. I feel, I correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, like I got into your language a little bit better than someone that's like, I put my camera on P mode and I'm a pro, you know? And I did forgotten processes, you know, large format, cyanotypes, all that kind of stuff, just to try to understand exposures and things like that. So when you do use the crazier technology, you understand where it came from and why it's working the way it works.
Yeah.
You have the foundation.
Yeah. I have kids in my classes now that are like, why is the burn tool in Photoshop a hand? And I'm like, well, we used to use our hand in a dark room to guide the light, you know?
But you mentioned One Light book, and if you've never read this book, it's by Joe McNally. I can tell you, I was studying photography here. I was doing BTEC National Diploma in Photography. This is the book I've read on lighting. Because when I was studying, they would give us a big mass flash, G200, and say, you go figure it out. And that's how we learn, you know. So you take the flash out during the day, you go outside, and you try to figure out how to use film and flash. And your book, it was really inspirational. I got it signed, by the way, last year. So it's, you know.
I got all my books signed by him. It's funny how they progress from like, thanks for buying this. Okay, Seth. Like here's the last one. All right, you got it. Thanks, buddy.
The Mets, I haven't heard that in a long time. I was a big flash. It was also pretty good in the Street Riot, you know, and that was what it was good for. It was one of those kind of massive,
with D-cell batteries in it. But you used to have to shoot with it and have a notebook so you knew what you did on each frame. Yeah. So that when you got it developed, you're like, oh, that was over by a stop. What was I at? Boom, you know?
It's a dear diary.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about mentoring is that you have to be confident in and of yourself to be an effective mentor. And I learned that 100 years ago from Ralph Morse, who was the dean of American space photography. And he shot the original Merc 7 for life. And Ralph was a dear friend and still passionate about photography into his later years. And when America went back to space with the shuttle program, all of us young pups, we didn't know what to do. We had no idea how to shoot a spaceship, or anything like that, go on a rocket blast. And Ralph took us all to lunch. And even though he was shooting for Time magazine and we were theoretically his competition, he sat down and told us all how to do it.
Wow.
And that's the mark of a confident photographer. Because at the end of the day, he still knew he was going to kick our butt.
Yeah.
And he did.
But like that, I don't know if I think it did stick to you in a different way, because not a lot of photographers at Joe's level or in general will pay forward. And I think that for this industry to survive, if you want to keep it around and keep the craft and the discipline and everything going forward, there has to be another generation.
Yes.
And there's no secrets. No one can take your style.
No.
No one can shoot the way you're going to shoot in that instance. You have to kind of get to that place where you're peaceful, because I wasn't for a long time. I was like, I'm elbowing guys for jobs, whatever. But then I was like, you know what? Like, I have to make myself strong enough to where they're going to want me to be the one that does that job. But if you don't pay it forward, we have no future. And that's kind of why I went so heavy into YouTube and so heavy on the social tutorial stuff. And Daniel Norton and this guy taught me how to teach it.
Yeah.
Like the format I watch these guys do, although you walk right out of frame way too much when you teach.
Yeah, I wander. I wander physically and mentally.
Let's put a lasso around you to get you back into the demo area all the time.
Annie, my wife, gets very concerned sometimes when I leave the house.
Got to put a bell on him.
Where did you go?
I hope he comes back.
GPS tracker, just to be on the
It is a
safe
GPS
side.
tracker, yeah, it's true.
Exactly. But I do think that is such an important principle that people forget, is that there is enough space in this world for everyone to create something, whether that's in, whether you're doing other artistic endeavors like music or writing or painting or photography or acting or dance. It doesn't matter, because all levels of creativity are important, and why not let everyone share that space? So that's really nice to hear you say as well.
Well, being a teacher is a very high calling. In any profession or in education, raising children, etc. When you intersect with a good teacher, that's a very significant moment in your life.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Can make or break the student.
True. Do you think it's much harder for young talent nowadays to get into that industry without going all the way in on social media?
I think it's hard for a generation to even care to get there for themselves.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just as about finding someone to connect and find that path. They have to want to. But a lot of times they're thought of like, buy the specs, buy the new thing, buy this, it'll do it for you, stuff like that. But they're not, they just see the likes. They just see the followings. They don't see the work that actually has to go into it. And nowadays building a brand so that they're understanding who they're ingesting the images from, because I don't think that was such a thing back in it didn't matter who it was shot. It was the shot.
Exactly. I mean, we live in an era where the BTS is just as important, sometimes even more important than the ultimate shot.
Yeah.
And, I look back on some of the crazy stuff I've done over the course of my career, and I have no BTS, because we just didn't care. We weren't the story. Okay. The picture was the objective. The picture was the story.
Yeah.
The camera was just a conveyance, to get that information out there through this machine and put it in a magazine or wherever and move people, involve people, make them think, make them stop, and I think it's very hard right now to make a huge dent in the marketplace for young photographers. I'm very sympathetic to that, because there's such an overwhelming wash of stuff out there.
For sure.
It's just endlessly back and forth. And sticking out from that in a significant way, which Seth has actually been really, really good at doing, making a brand for yourself, standing apart from the crowd, that's a hard thing to do. It really is.
I just don't try to sell people stuff. That's it. I mean, everyone that's getting on a soapbox to talk something to build a channel is in the end trying to sell something to somebody. I'm just like, I'm good. Like, I really don't want to,
So no presets.
You know, I don't even edit, right? So it's like, I wish I could sell presets. I'd be making money in my sleep. I'm going to sell just like their non-adjustments. Just like, give me a donation. They pretend that they do presets.
I would be very, very cautious about the Seth Miranda plugin. I just really would.
Why? No, it's just, all it does is pop up and yell at you when you're trying to, when you do too much or retouching. Exactly. You're like, what? She has no blood vessels anymore? What's going on?
Hello? What? Hello? You know?
What is
Don't
this?
you think you should open up those shadows a little bit? What are you thinking?
Oh, nobody has pores anymore. Got it.
Oh, okay.
You're all just, the lights, their eyes illuminate naturally. Got it.
Yeah,
you know?
Would you use the Jennifer Aniston slider on this? Come on.
The problem is you can't uninstall it after this. It just goes there permanently. You have to format the hard drive. Yeah.
It's like Clippy in the corner.
Yeah, the little paper
You have a
clip.
soundboard with all your phrases. Just press it.
I don't know. I'd pay good money for that plugin. I think I would quite enjoy that.
But think about why people buy presets. Think about it. They just want to get to an end result.
Yeah.
They don't want to figure out what color grading is.
Exactly.
You know, and I can't blame them because not all of us are going into this for the long game. They're just like, I bought this thing. I want to shoot this thing. I want to put this thing on social. And then I'm going to go back to my accounting job for my 9 to 5. Like,
Right.
I get it, you know, but I think there's value in at least getting your toes dipped into where all that came from. Why are these shadows cool toned? What are we doing with this? What is actual skin tone? What is pleasant color versus accurate color? What are we talking about here? What's really cinematic? What is the actual definition of that? Or did someone just tell you this is a cinematic preset?
Just click it.
Looks like the Joker. Ooh, looks like, teal and turquoise. Ooh.
Orange and blue, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, it's about understanding the language of light. Light has emotion, and it's not clinical, and it's not a pure absolute. You know, it's interpretive. And that's the mindset I think you have to bring to it. And to understand that, you have to understand the gamut of storytelling and what a camera can and cannot do.
Yeah.
As smart as these cameras are, I mean, the Z9, you know, when I started, it wasn't even science fiction, a camera like that, you know, but it sits on the table. Does it do anything for you? Until you put your eye and your heart into it and direct the camera.
Joe. It has auto capture, Joe. They don't need to do that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay.
Yeah.
You mean I don't have to do anything
Nothing.
anymore?
No.
Wow.
But my favorite part of all this stuff, though, is when people come with like these crazy kits, tons of money, and they realize, oh, it really is the light. like they really still have to look for light or create the light, because without that, it's garbage going into just expensive gear, you know?
Do you reckon there's a lot of false information on YouTube and just people just jump on things?
The internet is all true. Everything's honest and true.
Put in tinfoil hat. But I'm sure like every now and then you check your early images and you look at them, let's say what you do now and what you did before in terms of, let's say, technical side of things. Do you find the moment where you see, like, if I would know what I know now, would shoot it completely differently?
Oh, Lord. I mean, I look at some of my early stuff and I'm wondering why and how I ever got another job. You know, I mean, because the utter, absolute garbage. In fact, I have a new book out, The Real Deal, Field Notes from the Life of a Working Photographer. And I had my friend Andrew shoot me. I went down to Allentown, where he lives, and I brought down a clean garbage can, a big one, and a couple thousand of my old transparencies. And I dumped them in an alleyway in Allentown, dumped them into the garbage and climbed in. And I had an agfa loop and surrounded by all these slides. All you can see is me from the neck up. And I titled that little chapter, What Was I Thinking?
Yeah,
You know?
right, I remember that.
And it's a learning curve.
It takes a lifetime to refine an eye. You're always going to go back to shots that you thought were like amazing, even ones that were validated, covers, whatever. And you're like, if I just did this, there would have been sick. But you weren't at that place as a creator, as a photographer. Even if you had the skills to pull a technique off, it wasn't in that Rolodex in your brain to pull out that moment. And it'll haunt you. So there's still stuff I think about that shots I forget about, right?
Oh.
It's just,
it eats your soul. It does.
And after all these years, are you still learning?
Oh God, yeah.
I teach him stuff every day. Every day I teach him stuff.
He's not lying. I mean, I call him up sometimes. I'm like, so give me the skinny on this, you know, because it's, you know.
What's those kids do nowadays?
You know, Seth, the young people, what are they up to lately? You know, I love that music. You know, no, it's a question of, you know, listening in, you know, as best as you can. And I said it earlier, the onslaught of technology is hard to keep up with, you know, to be sure. But at the end of the day, not confusing that, knowing about it and having it it's like a computer program that's sort of running in the background. You don't let it dominate your thinking. At the end of the day, what has to dominate your thinking is, how do I communicate? What visually can speak to other people? How can I tell stories? How can I treat people fairly, decently, honor my subject, and come away with a photograph that actually has viability, editorial seaworthiness, even dare to dream the power and capacity for memory that people will, it's one of the more gratifying things that people will look at me and say, I remember that photograph.
Yeah. And one of the things that Joe has always been good on is like keeping up with like the next technology, even if it's not something you think he would use or makes sense for what he's doing. But he was talking about TTL. He's one of the first guys talking about TTL and stuff like that. When people are like, you don't need that. It stands for totally terrible light. Really? Look what this guy's doing, And one of my best moments for me, I always bring this up to you, is he called me up during the whole pandemic thing. He's like, Seth, I'm trying to set this camera up as a webcam and I can't figure it out. I was like, this is amazing. This guy cleaned up my game to get me to a place where my career grew enough to where I'm on like almost a colleague level, I'd say,
Yes, you are. No,
he comes to me asking me how to do something for a change. Like I was like, this was just like, it's like you pawned something and you got enough money back to get about a pawn, that's kind of what it felt like, but he also is really, what I really appreciate about Joe, which a lot of other ambassadors for brands do not do, is he'll call me up when something new comes out from another brand and goes, explain it to me. And why is that important? And so even if it's not important, he just wants to know the philosophy of why they went there. How does this elevate anything that we would do? Is it just marketing that they're selling, or is it something that I should be considering for something I would want in my toolkit? And that is a humbling experience for somebody that's like, I can't even shoot another brand because I'm on this roster, but he wants to know. He wants to know what else is going on out there, even if he's not going to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's important, just understanding where technology is going and how, let's say, what another brand is doing might relate to what Nikon is doing in the future and things like that?
Sure. No matter how fancy the cameras get, what do we have at the end of the day? We have f-stops and shutter speeds, and there's technology in the Z9 that I probably never use,
For sure.
but I have to be aware of it on a just-in-case basis, because there are things that could make my job easier. I guess that's my definition of technology as it benefits me. I don't worship at the altar of technology. There's lots of folks out there, and I call it hiding in the pixel woods. They really kind of don't shoot maybe all that well. I'm being, genteel
Sure,
here.
You're okay. That's okay to
but
say.
they know tech up, down, and sideways. I'm kind of hopefully the reverse of that. I can shoot well, and I use the technology if it makes my job easier.
Yes. Yeah, which I think is the sensible way around to do it, just for the simple reason that then essentially the art comes first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That brings us to this new thing that just happened, which is called global shutter. And a part of all the things about sports photography, big thing about it is the lighting, where they say that you can now capture light at 80 thousandths of a second. And you use artificial light quite a lot. Do you think it's a game changer? Do you think you now have to throw away all your cameras that, and just all your years of photography that you've shot before,
He's priming it.
Exactly. So like, do you think like you need this now? Or how do you look at it as a professional photographer?
Over to Seth on that.
First of all, I just want people to realize 80,000th of a second, as amazing that it is, even at like 1.2, you're at 64,000 in ISO just to get going. So to get something to come up. It's cool. It's great that we can achieve things, and we always want those higher specs just to know that it's possible. Global shutter is not replacing anything. It's another option. If that's the way things worked, we would all be shooting stacked sensors with no mechanical shutters right now. The stacked sensor has been around for probably about 10 years now in consumer hands. Global shutter has been around for a couple of years already in the video market.
Yes.
Is global shutter opening things up? Sure. Is there caveats? Yes. It's crazy to think that you're just getting magic and don't think that there's trade-offs. What I will say is this is what creates the class of cameras next. So instead of it being like the pixel war where we were like all about resolution, now look at Nikon, for example. Z5, non-BSI sensor, standard sensor, mechanical shutter, nice and low cost price point for entry level. Then you get BSI sensor, Z6, Z7, that's a more refined image, lower noise by like a stop or two. And then you get stack sensors, no blackout, no mechanical shutter, no wear and tear on a mechanical mechanism. It's amazing, right? And now we're going into global, but all those tiers are about the type of technology, not the resolution, not the things we were chasing in the past. Global is just starting, and it is not something that I would say is the next coming of anything. Because for some people, it's not something that they want to trade off. For example, price. You might, as a pro, you have to buy, you're like 3 bodies deep all the time. You want to do 3 bodies deep on Gen 1 technology that's going to cost a lot, or you're going to wait for it to refine.
Sure.
I mean, we're talking about dynamic range. We're talking about image quality. This is trade-offs for, do you need the speed? And then the other discussion, which I know we were talking about, was the flash sync thing, which, shooting flash at 80,000 of a second is amazing, but that's not the practicality. What you want to do is just not use high-speed sync when you don't have to. So 8,000 of a second without having to do a high-speed sync, which longer flash durations, longer recycling times, lots more power, having to get this strobe closer to subject, all sorts of caveats to getting high-speed sync to work. However, now I have to go and find a way to sync this strobe in a different way for global, which means I have to get that bell curve of the strobe to hit at the right point. So now we have to delay it. So I'm the only person in the room that shot the global shutter for what came out in the market just now. I was surprised that was the method we had to do it in. I thought it was going to be a method of like a TTL. It reads it, it sets it. We're not there yet, obviously.
No, you have to go to the menus of the camera.
You have to go to a menu and figure it out. And if you change anything, you have to go back to menu and figure it out, which is fine. The fact that we can still do it is amazing. But is it there for the method I want to work in? For me personally, not now.
So the best way before the global shutter would be, let's say, if you want a fast sync speed, you either use high-speed sync, which came later, and earlier would be leaf shutter, basically.
Yeah.
How often, Joe, do you use high-speed sync or, let's say, leaf shutter for your shoot? So you normally just stick to 200s of a second, let's say, and call it a day?
I'm in high-speed sync fairly frequently. Leaf shutter, no, because I don't have a medium format system anymore. That's how we used to have to shoot basketball when we strobed arenas for Sports Illustrated. So if you can imagine follow focusing a fast-moving basketball player with a Hasselblad, those gentlemen mostly at Sports Illustrated who I learned from, I mean, that's real skill. That's real skill. So then the gift of all gifts, we went to high-speed sync. I can sync a flash at 8,000 of a second. And yes, I listening to Seth and I looked at the information that came out around global shutter of late, and I think, okay, that's cool. Why would you? Do I need it? Those are primary questions, and the fact is I don't.
Yeah.
I'm quite comfortable in the realm of making high-speed sync work. It suits me, and I can cover the waterfront of my assigning work. 80,000th of a second sounds cool, but also think about this. I mean, that's a highly specialized, neck of the woods to be in. How often will I need that? And where am I going to get the funding, to do a highly specialized job? Am I assigned to shoot a bullet going through an apple? No. Who's going to do that? Nobody. Even National Geographic is a shell of what it used to be. The basement at the Geographic was the tech department. And if you had a specialized need, those folks there could build you a camera. Basically, they could build you a system. Emery Christoph at the Geographic devised the first lighting rigs that went down to illuminate the Titanic. So unless you're James Cameron, and you have no budgetary restrictions whatsoever, some of this technology, I think, is nice to admire, but its practicality is very dubious.
But it's just nice to know that it's in our hands. Like it's gotten to that point. I mean, look at what's filming us. This would have been like 6 Pelican cases, right? Way back in the day.
True.
So it's kind of incredible. What I will say is the one thing I do like about the idea of the global shutter for strobe is any flash unit becomes high speed sync at that point. So I have old Speedotron units and all this kind of stuff that is totally not going to be high speed sync unless I do something like global shutter, but it's 2400 watt seconds when I need it. I can rip the paint off a house with it, you know, but
let's do that.
but for real, I mean, it's something to be said. What's ironic though, is I use my 2400 watt second packs with a leaf shutter for 4x5. So technically I have high speed sync that way, if you think about it kind of in a weird way. I'm getting off topic here, but the reality is, we're just beginning. So I think for people to just, who have never even touched it, by the way, to start saying it's going to replace everything and all technology is garbage. Are you crazy? Look what you're doing with the technology you have right now. And you're going to tell me because someone told you something exists that hasn't even hit the mark yet, everything else is garbage?
Yeah.
That is probably the biggest problem we have right now. And I think in your comments, you probably read all the time, like, I get by with my D7200. The D7200 guys are diehards.
There's always a comment about the film camera. I was still shooting with my f2 and all the new cameras is hype. But I think it's important to ask this question about global shutter to the viewers, because we in this YouTube space, which is very amplified, we're very technology driven. And if you look at the, you know, all the videos around that thing, they say it's the next big thing since sliced bread and everyone should have it, which is not. I mean, if you look at the professional photographers, they say, yeah, it's nice to have. Maybe it's not there yet. You know, we'll see in a couple of years what's going to be there.
I'd rather see stack sensors take over more. I think it's so close to giving us what global gives us as far as no motion distortion, no blackout, things like that, high frame rates. At this point, it's about processing the data that's coming off that sensor so that we can actually, you can still do 120 frames a second. I mean, there's systems that are doing 195 frames a second on stack sensors right now. It's the hardware's doing it. Now we just need to get processors up to speed. I think our biggest problem right now, forget about global shutter. I don't want cameras getting hot. I don't want batteries draining. That's what I want to, we're getting into the tech, but not into the practicality of harnessing the tech to make it usable sometimes. So because we want to sell specs, right? So the higher numbers go, yay, I go happy here because numbers go up, you know?
And a happy Seth is a good Seth. You know, you want to keep Seth happy.
As long as he's well fed.
Just give me pizza. But don't you think it doesn't matter what it is if you're not connecting with it? If that tool doesn't feel native, you're not doing anything.
Exactly. I mean, you know, history is important every time you step to the camera. You know, because photographers, we're mosaics really of everything the way we were raised, what we've read, how we feel, all of that sort of stuff. And that interfaces with technology. And then the technology opens certain doors. I mean, I lived through a lot of this stuff, right? Life magazine, when I was a staffer at Life, they asked me to shoot a highly complex, highly evolved photograph on film without the aid of a computer, because we wanted to show the world that we still shot real pictures on film and that digital stuff was just nasty. And all right, I was on staff.
Technology, Joe.
I'm like, I came up with an idea and I shot Vanessa Williams and all 13 of her changes when she was at Kiss of the Spider-Man, when she was on Broadway. And Vanessa's absolute pro. She was on Broadway that night. She came to Silver Cup Studios and worked with me all day long. And she hit all of her marks. And I shot it on an 8x10 Sinar. And I had a millimetric gate that I drew all over the lens and made little slivers of exposure for every single outfit.
Wow.
And if I made one mistake, that sheet of film was garbage. And then Life took the two pieces of 8x10, butted them together in the middle, and did a 4-page gatefold.
Wow.
And it was the hardest shot I ever had to do. 2 years later, we were publishing digital photographs in the magazine.
Right.
So I'm very, very aware of the march of technology and how this stuff will become valuable. But right now, my mission is to survive, get jobs, work, do good work. And whatever tools I have right now, I'm happy with. I really am.
And not for nothing, advancements like global might make it easier for someone to get a higher, what we consider a higher tier camera for an easier cost right now. So it knocks down that technology more. So a stack sensor becoming $3,000 one day, $2,500.
Yeah,
amazing. Right now, I think the lowest cost full frame stack sensor is still like $4,000.
Yeah,
crop sensor is about 35, $3,000, 35. So imagine we get to what's in a Z8 in someone's hand at $2,000 in a few years because global exists now for the higher end.
Yeah.
That's really the change you see. Not that the technology's there and it's reachable. It's what everyone else gets to reach for and actually get in hand.
Very true.
It's fun to talk about, but in hand's another deal.
I mean, Nikon's been very smart, I think, to take the Z9 and basically transfer the power of that camera to a Z8 form factor. Smart move.
Yeah.
The fact that you have Z8 technology available, as Seth is saying, at a certain price point, that's crazy.
They're thinking weird over there. I mean, ZF, when I did the video for the ZF, as soon as the end, they're like, single card, whoa, is that a micro SD slot next to an SD slot? And I'm like, well, I guess that kind of makes sense because now it's smaller, keeps the cost down. You still get 2 card slots. They're doing their retro bodies. No one else seems to be doing retro, even though they have heritage. But it's just really interesting to see Nikon go, well, we'll put out a Z9, but also a Z8. And people be like, but they're the same camera. It's like, no, now it's more accessible. Oh, now it has 2 USB-C ports so you can power it and run data the other way. And all these like weird little things they're doing, you kind of wonder what's going on in those engineering talks that they're not even listening to what other people are doing sometimes and going their own way. And you have to look at your system, whatever brand you're in, about the philosophy. I did a whole video about a philosophy of a brand is the most important spec. The specs will always get there. The brands will always leapfrog each other as far as what's available technology-wise, but it's how they handled it. Was it at the cost of the consumer for it, right? Did they make it refined or do they want to get out there first? Is there support? Do they offer support for older bodies or they're just trying to sell you the next one? Do they believe in resolution or speed? Do they like really look at the philosophy of what that brand's putting out and how they think a market should be or be received and see if it aligns with what you're doing? I really don't care too much about speed too much when I'm shooting strobe in a studio.
Right.
I care about image quality one of my biggest things is image quality. But when I have to do a job, I don't want to worry about getting a second camera to go do that sports job I got to go do it. No, I want to know that things. And I do, the more this sounds like a freaking ad. The more I use my Z9 and the more I move into it and the more I customize and the more I beat the hell out of it, the more I like that camera. And that hasn't happened for me in a very long time.
Wow.
So now I got the thing so dialed, I'm working 3 times faster. My custom buttons are so dialed inside the grip, I'm not taking the camera down.
Yeah.
So I'm going from strobe to ambient to video, bringing it back, shooting the jewelry, shooting the face, and I'm out of there in 45 minutes. It's like, what? But I'm still charging him a day rate, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you go over half an hour, I think you should charge a day and a half.
You get a full day rate for 10 minutes. You're like, our rock star guy only has 10 minutes, Joe.
Back in the day of magazine rates were very minimal rates. But John Loengard, who was the boss at Life, always said to me, if you lift a finger, it's a day.
Interesting.
And he was the boss. And he said, because he knew photographers, when you get a job, you're chewing on it. Even if you're not physically in the field, you're chewing on it and chewing on it. You're prepping for it. There's a lot of time that clients never see.
Yeah.
That's behind the
Very
curtain.
true. Yeah.
And so when you're working for a day rate and, people look, well, it's one day, no, this has been many days for me, right? I've thought about it, prepped for it, gotten there, have myself in the mind frame that it will lead to success. And then afterwards, I've got to look at it. I've got to edit it. I've got to process it. All those things that go into the complexity of staying alive as a photographer.
Yes.
How about you, all the years to acquire the kit to do it? And if not, the extra days you had to go to rent it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And let's not even add to that the knowledge that you've had to accrue in order to get there.
Yeah, anybody can do it.
Anyone.
The
Absolutely.
automatic cameras nowadays, anybody can do it.
It literally does shoot for you. The auto capture literally shoots for you now.
You have to set it up though.
So we're all talking about technology, but as you said, a lot of it is about actually lighting itself. Where is the point where you start to actually see the quality of light? Because obviously, we have like a lot of cheap lighting available nowadays. We have expensive lighting available nowadays. When do you start to actually see the difference between the two? Years of experience?
I once had an editor say something that kind of broke my head a little bit. A million years ago, he said, if the quality of the image is all I notice instead of what the image is about, it was a failed image.
Wow.
So it was about the context, content. And I remember at the time, this was post 9/11, there was an image on I think it was the cover of Time. It was like 4 pixels. The guy was running while a guy was firing a gun. He shot it and it was all pixelated, but it didn't matter because you got it and you felt it. And I was like, I absolutely get what this guy's saying. So for me, there's a balance point that you have to get to an image of, in the end, what is that image? I don't care what you shot it with. I don't care what it is, but what is that image and how did you get there? For me, I always try to keep lighting as like my pinnacle, because if that's clean, I can do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Seth. Pulitzer Prize winning photographs. How many of them stick with you? You can remember. But you look at the roster of them, poorly composed, super grainy, of the moment. What is the important thing about a powerful photograph is the way it connects to the human heart and the human spirit.
Right.
And lighting is part of that, for sure. It's not the be all and end all, but I've always dedicated myself as thinking about light as language, and therefore I must be articulate or my stories will not be well told.
Yeah, but don't you think, like right now, what's going on very on trend, or at least very popular now, is younger shooters are shooting on-camera strobe, like real paparazzi style. And to me, they're doing that because it's so honest, it's so real, it's so not polished that they don't feel like they're being lied to, because we all grew up with over-retouched, marketed images that were just like served to us. These kids are like, I've had enough of that, and I just want to see transparency. I want to see reality. And I think there's something to that, as much as some snobby people would probably be like, that's not photography. It's like, nah, it's a style. You have to respect that it's at least a style, but what makes successful that they're connecting to? And I think it's, no matter what, the image has to be honest.
Yeah, I absolutely. And if you choose to express yourself with raw light, that's okay. I mean, look at Ellen von Untworth, wonderful, crazy fashion photographer. She's always using a ring flash or some sort of, lens-bound light that produces really hard shadows, and she does all this sexy, crazy stuff. I mean, I love it. Look at David LaChapelle.
Yep.
Off the charts, crazy stuff. It's about how you want to express the moment that you're seeing.
Yeah, David LaChapelle once said, like, do whatever you want with them. Just make sure they look good. And that's all that mattered, was that people have to have an attraction to the subject, but everything else, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, because I shoot a lot of effects, and sometimes like, this girl's too beautiful to be a zombie right now. I still see these amazing crystal blue eyes. I think, I don't know.
Not selling it.
Let's put some scars on your face.
It's the Holy Trinity, right? According to Jay Maisel, light, color, gesture.
Right.
They have to work in concert.
But I think before anything, intent. You have to have intent with the shot. This is all language. If you don't know what you're trying to say before you say it, no one's connecting to anything.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that, even if it is of the moment, is your choice in style. And if it is something that's very raw, you're going with that, because if I was going to go shoot at like some like hotel party that's full of people, like, no, I'm not setting up, let's get a nice studio area. I'm going to rip it hard with some crazed out light, because I just want you to feel like you're there.
Yes.
You're feeling it, and you're freezing those moments of like mouths wide open and sweat and, just all that kind of stuff.
So what it boils down to is the communication of the image rather than the quality of the communication of the image.
You know this stuff. You just want us to say it. You know
Those are just the tools and the image that will matters. I think it's important to repeat that, because like, you go on the internet and all they care about is text space and megapixels and autofocus speed.
Con is a bit jaded by it all, as you can tell.
Yeah, but
I'm against all this.
No, but don't you? Okay, first of all, hold on. I think there's two different things. There's photography, and then there's people who have the hobby of buying photo gear.
Right.
And then there's people who don't buy photo gear and just want to regurgitate specs to make themselves pseudo-intellectual, so they have something to talk about on a forum that people don't know who they are.
Right.
Okay? And that's the reality of it.
Yeah, don't sugarcoat it for us, Seth.
Listen, I'm not being derogatory. You all know it's true. It's really what's happening is people are looking for something to say all the time. Look at comments on anything that's out there. It's an opinion, and who are you and why should I care about the weight of your opinion? For me, I'd rather have someone who has worked hard to put themselves out there as a person that should have weight to what they're saying, because they have a pedigree and a legacy. When Joe says something, you're going to listen to it because of everything that dude's done. I don't really care about a guy that got to review cameras every week for a few seconds, when they don't even really take the time to understand, how did a brand get to this point that it's here in my hand? Why were those decisions made? And when you start taking that into account, you look at everything a little different. It's not just tech specs. They want to get the price down. They want to change this. They want to get like that. Whatever it is. But if you don't take that time, you're just spitting.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing right now is we have a lot of people just talking. And most of the people that are talking on those forums are not even buying the gear they're talking about or touching it or using it. And I'm going to start this right now. You should have to show a portfolio to talk to me. You should not.
Someone's zooming slowly on his face right now.
You should have to have a portfolio slapped down in a photo forum before you start telling me what I should have done different or what you're going to do. Like, don't do this backseat quarterback. What is it?
Armchair quarterback.
Backseat driver, armchair quarterback's like a person that, because we don't have American football over here, so I don't get the
armchair quarterback is the guy who's like 40 pounds overweight, has got a bowl of Cheetos and a beer, and criticizes the quarterback for throwing it long.
Right.
So look, the easiest thing to do is to stand on the sidelines and criticize those who are actually playing the game.
For sure.
And I'm not down on criticism. Constructive criticism is essential to the creative process, but it has to be kind of a meeting of the minds. Right?
Yeah.
And the people who are critiquing you or offering up, perhaps advice or a path, if you will, you have to be able to respect those people because they've traveled a path.
But that's the thing is we've lost the art of building respect.
Yeah.
We've lost this, like, I have to work on myself so that people hear me when I talk rather than being this annoying copy paste out there of an avatar that's not even a person that I should know. I mean, for real, like there's so much difference between the weight of someone that actually has shown that what their words actually mean something. And what they're saying that their words, whatever, you know what I'm saying. I'm on no sleep, guys.
Yeah, I mean, feedback is important, and there will always be naysayers. Look, again, the creative life, I mean, we put out something on Instagram and somebody criticizes us. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can understand that point of view. I mean, it is part and parcel of trying to bring something that speaks to people. Think about people who launch a movie that cost $100 million and nobody goes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just a picture, that we're talking about. So, but I also do understand that your emotions and your ego and all that stuff is wrapped up in what you produce. So it can sting a little bit. But if you take the best of it, the best level of that advice and try to incorporate it, think about it and say, okay, yeah, I can get that point of view for sure. But there are some folks out there, as Seth is saying, who are just ranting. And, that's just not worth the time to listen to.
Sure.
Conversation is important, but I think it's important for people to work on themselves to be worth listening to.
Right.
Anybody can type. Anybody can leave comments. Anybody can keep saying the same thing over and over again. Misinformation is flying. And I know how you feel when we go to trade shows. There's just people talking at you like, are you just like watching YouTube and that's your whole education point? There's no vetting on YouTube, right? You can put out a video right now, be like, sky's green, until someone writes a bunch of comments saying you're wrong, and then they gets questioned. But I can literally put out any, and even people just read the title, and then that becomes gospel before you don't even watch it.
That's true.
So I think it's important that we get to a place after all these years. Everyone's tired of it. Work on yourself. Get yourself to a place where people respect what you're going to say, and then understand that when you say it, now people are actually listening. So watch how you're going to say it.
Yeah.
And really do your work if you want me to do the work to absorb what you're saying.
Yeah, well taken.
Amen to that.
Let's talk about flat Earth.
I mean, it's true, right? So I mean,
Sky's green, Earth is flat.
Sorry, yeah, it's very valid. It's very, very valid.
I mean, hopefully we get to a place where people are excited to shoot, excited for anyone that's shooting, as opposed to this like you bought that, or people using purchasing decisions as intellect.
Yeah, it is always.
You know what I'm talking about.
It's a very valid point.
Yeah, I had a conversation years ago. I was on a job, the power grid of the United States, and I was flying a lot on helicopters up into power towers, and the helicopter pilots are amazing, and they have a big ego.
Yeah.
And then it's one fella, saw, I was a photographer for National Geographic, and he just started rattling off all of the gear he had. I mean, it was like an endless roll call of like this and that. And I got the, 200, the 7,000 zoom with the Eddie Bauer coating and,
Did you say thank you for your contribution to our industry?
And at the end of it, he just looked at me and he goes, my problem is content. And I was like, that's a big problem.
I have to take pictures, actually.
All the gear, doesn't mean anything. Content is kind of the deal, so that is really the not the end of the discussion. That's the wrong way to put it, but it's
the beginning of it.
Inherently important factor of the discussion. It's why we have the discussion is how do we get better at this? How do we communicate better? How do our skills sort of that we put on the table speak to people somehow, some way?
Well, unless your audience member is blind, photos are the most universal language on the planet, no matter what. But if you don't have anything to say, or you're not chasing after something to share with everyone, you're just taking pictures. And that's fine. If you just get psyched on shooting that butterfly and that daisy for the millionth time, knock yourself out.
The beautiful thing about the photographic industry or being part of this and being passionate about it, and I see it at workshops all the time, is you'll get folks coming up to you and saying, your book or, the teaching that you gave me changed my life, and now I have a small, senior portrait business in some, market somewhere. Or you can just see how enraptured folks are in the field. They're so passionate about getting the bird, the landscape, the portrait, and we'll see it. We'll see it in the next couple of days, at our workshop. People are really eager to learn. And as a teacher, I respect that completely, and I'll go the extra mile for those people. Whenever I'm critiquing someone, I try to find a lifeline. I try to offer them a lifeline. And, this over here, working pretty well. This over here, let's talk about it. And that is the essence, I think, of constructive critique.
For sure. There's one thing that Jim Brandenburg said to me many years ago when he was here, which was, it doesn't matter if you take the same photograph as someone else. So you want to take a picture of the waterfall order. In his case, he was saying like the wolves, for example. Other people want to come and take pictures of those wolves. Said you will always put your unique personality into that photograph. So
exactly.
By no means does anyone want to gatekeep photography for any other person.
No,
it's a free, and I call it, especially now we're in the digital age, I call it the democracy of digital. Go for it.
Yeah.
Shoot what you feel, shoot what you love, and then
you paid for every one of those pixels. Use them.
Yeah, it's true.
We'll all talk about it afterwards.
That's right. So what's next for you? So you've got the workshop that by the time this airs will have happened. So hopefully you will have survived that and you'll come out of it in one piece.
Will we even make it there?
Well, by the time this comes out, you'll be back in the maelstrom of New York City retail.
New York City holiday season, dude. Like, yo, I get it. It's a tree. Like, I don't know. Whatever. Just come to my city, leave your money and go.
Excellent. So what's next for you, apart from surviving the retail season, surviving the workshop, getting through the holiday season, which obviously we know working in retail is a very intense time period for...
I chill. Retail's chill for me because I am shooting the production for the new releases and stuff. So I don't really see that side of it too hard. I just get to play with all the new gear, which is super fun.
Nice.
At some
Pretty
point,
amazing.
It can be super frustrating because you're getting prototypes or no spec sheets and trying to relay something.
Well, you get it for half an hour.
5 seconds. Yeah. And then people like tell you what you did wrong in the video. I'm like, I had it for 45 minutes. And that includes learning what the hell it was.
Exactly.
As far as what's next, honestly, I'm really getting psyched on the event space I just built at Adorama.
Which is great, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It was a huge hill to climb. I built it myself for 2 months.
Wow.
All Nikons, right?
It's Nikon Z6 6 camera points. And you did a demo there, you christened it, so
we saw that workshop. It was great, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great space, and it humanizes the store.
Right.
It really does. And the fact that they are smart enough to realize that all over again and allow Seth to do that, it's going to pull people into the store. And
into shooting.
Yeah, yeah. And people love that kind of back and forth. There's a human touch there.
Completely.
Community, none of this industry is nothing without community, like nothing.
100%.
Even the people that are going to hate you in the comments, okay, but at least they're there.
The community aspect of this is very, very important.
Yeah.
It just really, really is. The back and forth of it, the support of it, all of that. And I've always felt very strongly about that. To be part of the photographic community, you have to jump in with both feet. You have to offer up ideas. You have to offer up your pictures and be subject to the same assessment that you might offer other people,
That said, Joe, when I first saw Joe do a demo, okay, it was at a trade show, And back then it was all dudes with vests full of pockets that were boring as hell and very curated, formulaic. And Joe got up there and he goes, oh, gee, golly gosh, you know how Joe does it. And he goes, how many of you have taken a bad picture? Cool. You're going to see a lot of them right now. And I was like, oh, snap. And yeah, he was just kind of like figuring it out. And that's where it came. Instead of going like, I know there were so many guys that measured it, put the stand right there. Don't touch that stand. It's got to stay there. And then they magically did these shots. Joe just went for it. I was like, that's how I want to do this. If I have to do this. And then when Dan Norton threw me to the wolves, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I literally poured out a bucket of gear. I was like, let's go shoot something. And working it out is, I think, the most valuable thing. And you're never afraid to do that. And I know you always bring up that time where people go, I thought it just happens for you. Yeah. And it's like the craziest thing to hear, right?
Right.
You sweat as much as anybody else when you're putting that shot together.
Because you want to get something good, you know, and it's a road that you travel. And I always tell people the road to a good picture is littered with bad photographs. It just is.
Now you just don't got to do them with Polaroids.
Oh my God.
Do you remember the Polaroid days?
Oh yeah.
The NPC backs with the ribbon that you got 2 shots out of. Remember that?
Yep. That was the Marty Forscher back. And I still have that FM camera that I have it with the back attached to it.
Wow.
And that camera, here's another, little historical reference that everybody takes for granted nowadays is second curtain sync.
Yeah.
I brought my FM2 to Marty because I was shooting for Sports Illustrated, and rear curtain sync was so important to me that I had him drill a second sync port into that camera.
Wow.
So the upper port was for front curtain, second port was for rear curtain.
That's incredible.
The architecture he revamped on the camera actually was more than the camera was worth. But the thing is, back in the day, Sports Illustrated was a machine. I had a contract with Sports Illustrated. I built Sports Illustrated for it.
Yeah.
I said, look, this is an important tool for me as a sports photographer in the field for you. And they said, yeah, fine. Okay. Yeah, we'll pay for it.
There you go. Amazing.
Small other story. It was so important. Rear curtain sync is, Greg Heisler and his work. And when he did a piece for Geo magazine many years ago on the lowriders, he actually made one of the motion pictures he made. He had the driver drive backwards so he could achieve the effect of rear curtain sync.
That's so smart.
Because his cameras couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So he had the action actually reversed and had the guy back up instead of go forward.
That's so clever.
So that is also what we're talking about today is aesthetic intent. And how do you get there?
Yeah.
Now it's just much easier to get there.
That's true. Seth, you mentioned the end result. Everyone wants the end result. They're going to buy presets or they're going to buy lighting setups and things like this. But it's how you get there. If you don't have the knowledge how to get there, and it's talking about your workshop where you say, no, I'll figure this out. You know how the light works. You know where it's set up. Buy the test. And that's where the knowledge comes from. Not just set the light around and it just takes you a good picture, or you put a preset on the file and it gives you the perfect result. It doesn't work this way. You need to learn the craft, and it comes from the experience by doing it over and over and over again.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that people get into is quicksand, where they're changing too many things at once because they don't know what to change to make. So if you have 1,000 variables when you shoot an image, if you're changing more than one thing at a time, you're creating even more variables, and you get yourself in quicksand. Goes, I don't know why the sky isn't blue. It's all blown out. Well, what's happening here? Are they backlit? Are you overexposing the sky to get them lit? Like, let's talk for a second. If you don't understand anything, it's just, I'm telling you, it's a language. If you don't understand what words to write, you're just writing gibberish. In the end, your shot is gibberish.
Yeah.
Was that your Cookie Monster voice? I don't know.
No.
That's how I envision what you sound like when I read your text.
And so 2024, what's in store for you, Joe?
Well, yeah, part of my mission next year is coming back here.
Good.
Coming back here.
Always welcome.
But there's a couple of jobs. The life of a photographer is very uncertain, especially the assigning life. Clients don't really commit to shooting a job and posting up some money to go shoot that job until they kind of really sort of have to.
Yeah.
So a lot of your life is lived in anticipation of that. I've got theoretically a pretty full schedule for the spring, a busy first quarter, which to me is always fraught with terror. I have to tell you, January for me is a terrifying month because it means I step once again out on the tightrope as a freelance photographer. I got no job. I don't know where the next paycheck's coming from. And I have to walk that tightrope again. And I've been doing it for basically for 40 years.
Yeah.
So I'm well used to it, but it doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, but you work for exposure. You don't get paid. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the old mantra, the client, this would be good for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Good for your portfolio.
yeah.
What about Paris Olympics? Are you planning to go there?
Yes, I'm planning on it. There's a lot of pressure on credentials. I'm in the credential mix right now. They haven't finalized the credentialing process. I have an uphill fight right now because I'm an independent. I shot 2016 for Sports Illustrated. Tokyo, I shot via my agency. I'm going to do the same thing again, hopefully this time around. But there's tremendous credential pressure on Paris.
No.
Go figure. Oh, everybody wants to go to Paris. Tokyo during COVID, maybe not so much.
No.
You know, Rio during Zika, you know, Paris. Okay, no, I have to go to Paris.
But they got Paris during bedbug season.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Apparently, they're traveling to England by Eurostar.
No. Please no.
So, yeah.
So hopefully, all being well, Paris.
All being well, yeah. We'll see how it goes. And the interesting thing for me as where I am photographically is years ago, the annual report market was a very lucrative, you know, companies really don't do much in the way of annual reports anymore. But what they do know, given the onslaught of social media, is they look around and realize they need a photo library. And they want a photo library that doesn't look like it was shot by Jimmy in the mailroom. You know, so, so they've reached out. There's a lot of infrastructure money floating around in the United States right now, rebuilding this and that. And so there's a couple of basically infrastructure utility companies that have reached out to me. It's complicated stuff. You know, it takes some figuring out to get interesting, graphically powerful material out of like a trench next door to Kennedy Airport, you know, stuff like that, where they're dragging pipe and you're down in this mud-filled trench while these guys are banging in pipe. How do you make a good photograph out of that? Well, you know, I find it fascinating, so I really go after it. So that has been an interesting element of the marketplace, a weird turn of events where folks have to establish not an annual report, but a photo library. And they pull from that and send their message out.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things like that that are in the pipe for the first quarter.
Exciting. It's been amazing having you here. We could talk all day, but I know that there's probably a point where you want to stop talking.
We're exhausting. Let's face it.
No.
Let's face it. You know?
I'm thinking of the fact that you've flown in and have made it all the way over here. But for our viewers, first of all, where can we find you, Seth?
Everything is Last X Witness on all social, and you can just find my name on YouTube. I'm in a bunch of channels, but follow my own. I just broke 30K this morning. I'm very excited.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
So,
It blew up, right? It blew up in about a month or so, yeah?
Yeah, from one video where I just yelled at people for lighting kids on fire. Knock yourselves out watching that video.
That works. Do that with your YouTube channels now.
But that really was what the video was about. But it just goes to show that you can keep going along until something actually connects, and that's when things make sense. So if you are a creator out there, even if you're not a photographer or whatever, like, just keep going forward. If you really believe in it and you really have something to share, just keep going forward. It's not about how much comes back. Eventually it'll grow no matter what. There's a big world out there and you're going to find your audience.
Exactly. And then Joe, where can our audience find you? I know that you're a busy man, so through your books, through your website?
Sure, all of the above. My Instagram is Joe McNally Photo, you know, and the book I wrote during the pandemic, that was a little bit of a silver lining of the pandemic. I had to stay home, so I wrote a book called The Real Deal, and it's a fun book.
It's a fantastic book.
And,
great.
It's got a lot of. There's learning in there, but it's based anecdotally. It's not like you know, put the light here kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so that's a fun read if you're interested. And yeah, I'm just around. I still write the blog. You know, I agree with Seth. You know, you have to put yourself out there. And even if 5 people are listening this week, 10 will listen next week, you know, et cetera. You have to build, and it's a slow build. You know, if it's legitimate, it's a slow build.
Yeah.
And I just want to shout out my favorite Joe's book is Sketching Light. Is probably my favorite of all the books that he's put out. And, you know, the new ones, great. But Sketching Light, like that's the one. If you want to learn like what it's like to shoot, That's the one.
I agree.
Hot Shoe Diaries, my publisher pushed back on that a little bit because there was a parallel soft porn.
The last thing I thought I was going to hear. The last thing I was gonna...
series back in the day called the Red Shoe Diaries. And when I said, no, Hot Shoe makes perfect sense.
Yes,
it's a play on words.
that's right.
And it was at first, like if you just pumped in Hot Shoe Diaries into a search channel on Google, it would come up with stilettos. Not my book.
I see. I can understand why maybe they decided that wasn't such a great idea.
Joe, I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hence the Hot Shoe Diaries. I thought it was perfect. And eventually they were on board and the book did well and all that sort of stuff.
Amazing.
That's how I met you, Joe.
I know.
I think I saw your book in Red Light District.
Oh, man.
I'm sure it's there.
Don't ask me what I was doing there.
Yeah, no, I won't.
I will say it took me a minute to realize it was a photo book because it's like a fire spinner dude, like with like no shirt on, like this, and I'm like, what? And then I realized it was a photo book.
Yeah, one speed light out on the beaches of Hawaii.
Wow.
It's amazing when you do one speed light. Just to be, we should do a whole series with just one speed light. We should do it.
Light is light, man. It doesn't matter how much or how little. It's what you do with it.
Yeah. With those words of wisdom, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. This has been an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Becky, Con, you guys do a great job.
Yo, and check out the shop if you're in London. Come out. Come out. Hit subscribe too. Help these kids out. She's not even gonna. She's dead now. So it's like
just subscribe. She's not going to be even there.
I will be.
No, she will be. She will be.
Stop trying to get rid of me.
Podcast is staying 2 months. Yeah.
Excellent. How do we want to conclude this?
I mean, I really enjoyed this podcast. It went just off rails in the first 5 seconds, and it just been there all the time. And I think this is probably our best podcast yet.
I think so
What?
too. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I hope I still have a career after this. I'm sorry.
Well, you're welcome to come here. I mean, I'm surprised they let you in the country first, but you're welcome to stay here.
There's only 2 countries not allowed in. There's only 2 countries.
This is not one of them. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Please give us a like and a subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye.
Good.